As many of you know, I grew up in deep Appalachia. I now live in Atlanta, Georgia, and there are times where I'll tell my friends stories from what happened to me when I lived out there, and they're like, what? I already posted about my UFO story last year, and that video got to like 3 million views. But today, I'm going to tell you guys the story of when I was a kid and I encountered a skinwalker. Or at least what I thought was a skinwalker. I hate long intros, so I'm just going to get into the story. The place I lived was a place called Jasper, Georgia. It's right next to LJ, and I lived in the place where the show Squidbillies was based on, and we have a Squidbillies shrine in our town center. I had a friend that I would stay with pretty often, and her family owned a 300-acre farm, and when I say family, it's just her and her mom who lived there. And so they have like all these farm animals, and they have different parts of their land that you have to walk through trails in the woods to get through. Like, in order to get to one barn, you have to walk through the woods for like 10 minutes just to get there. So there was one day that I was sleeping over there, and we had been home alone all day. I was probably in 3rd grade when this happened. Some of you might ask why me and my friend were just like 2 3rd graders alone on this farm. And it was because my parents were getting a divorce, and so I needed a place to go, so I pretty much lived with this girl at the time. But back to the story. So my friend's mom was on the way home, but I guess there was like a lot of traffic, or she was running late or something. So she called my friend and she asked her if we could like go down to one of the barns and feed the horses before we went to bed. So at this point in time, it was probably like 8 o'clock. The sun was going down. It was about to be nighttime. You could still see the sun and the light when you're in the open field, but in the woods, it was like pretty dark. Like there was no sunlight. So my friend and I started walking through the pasture to the woods, and she had a flashlight with her. We got to the woods, she turned the flashlight on, and we started walking. We were walking for maybe like 3 or 4 minutes through these woods, so we're about halfway through the trail, and we're just talking about some shit and laughing. And then all of a sudden, my friend just stops talking, and like I was kind of just like looking at her, like as we were speaking. I wasn't really looking in front of me. And then she just like drops the flashlight and starts sprinting in the opposite direction, like back to the house. And so I was like, "You okay, Rebecca?" And because that was her name. And I turn and I see her sprinting, and the flashlight was just like on the floor in front of me. And I was like, what the fuck? So I turn back in front of me, and I just see like maybe like 10 feet away this gigantic like white figure. And I didn't look at it for long, but just like the sheer height of this thing, whatever the fuck it was, scared me so badly that I looked at it and immediately was like fight or flight mode. Like I felt danger. So right when I looked at it, I turned the other way and fucking booked it. I was running faster than I'd ever ran before. So fast that I passed my friend, and I was like running and pissing my pants at the same time. Like that's how fucking scary it was. And so I ran all the way back to her house, and in my brain I was like, what is the one place I can hide right now where no one will find me? And the only thing I could think of was like I just ran to the laundry room and I got in the dryer. And so I was just sitting in the dryer, and it was like one of those old school dryers. It wasn't like plastic clear cover, so it was just like a white door that closes it from the front. And so I was just in there. I was like curled up in a ball, and I waited like, I don't know, what seemed like 15-20 minutes. I was just in there covered in piss, and eventually I thought that whatever the fuck was in the woods had like killed my friend. And so I was just crying, and like I was freaking out, but I was also terrified and didn't want to die. So I was just sitting in there. And then eventually my friend walks through the door, and I can tell that she's crying, and she's like hyperventilating. She's like like I hear that. And so I opened the dryer, and she's like scared when I open it, obviously. And I was just like also crying, and we hug each other, and I was like, where did you go? And so she told me that she had ran and she got into like this trailer that was kind of near the house because it was the only place she could think of to hide. And so we were both hiding, and I guess she just like mustered up the courage to run to the main house. And so we were both just like trying to explain what we saw and like put together whatever the fuck that was. And this was like 2008, maybe 2009. So I think I was like 12 or something when this happened, but this was way before like creepypasta or like any of these stories were like even around. So we couldn't even put a name to like what the fuck we saw out there. And so when her mom finally got home, we tried to explain what just happened, and she just like dismissed us, and she was like, you girls are just like overreacting. You guys saw a bear or like a deer or something, which is still terrifying if we saw a bear, but it definitely was not a bear because this thing was like pure white. And in the dark, it's like the only thing you can really see is like, if there's someone standing in front of you with a white t-shirt, like you're gonna see that. But this thing was completely white, and that's all I remember is just like this gigantic, like 7 or 8 foot tall thing just like standing right in front of me, staring at me. And so I'm not friends with this girl anymore. I haven't talked to her in probably like 15 years. But I just remember that story, and I remember being so scared that I pissed myself. And the only thing I could think of that being is like a skinwalker. So maybe that is a skinwalker. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I've never told that on here, so I hope you guys were entertained and enjoyed it, and maybe got scared. But anyways, later this week I'm gonna post another story about the Appalachian feral people, because I think I also had an experience with that when I was younger. There was a lot of weird shit that happened. But yeah, thank you guys.
If you ever find yourself hiking in Appalachia and come across a staircase like this, do not go up it. Someone left this comment right here, and I started doing a little more research, and what I found is astounding. There have been so many reported sightings of these abandoned staircases in the Appalachia woods, and it's a known rule that you do not go up these stairs. The story I'm about to tell you is chilling. This man had been hiking the Appalachia Trail for a few weeks when he came across this abandoned staircase in the woods. He said it was super out of place, and that the stairs actually were like very clean, even though there was like a lot of leaves and stuff that had fallen. The staircase was like immaculate. Intrigue got the best of him, so he decided he would go up and just check it out and see where it led to. But he said as soon as he got to the top, everything just got eerily quiet. He looked around for a little bit at the top of the stairs. It was nothing too interesting, so then he just turned around and went back. But when he got to the bottom of the stairs, the trail was gone. He wandered around trying to find his trail for hours. It was starting to get dark out, and he was really nervous that he was going to be stuck out there all night. And that's when he saw this like faint glowing light through the trees. The closer he got towards it, he noticed that it was a fire, and it was a couple of other hikers that were camping out for the night. He was super relieved at first, but then something was off. He said their clothes were super out of date. They were wearing these boots that were like caked with mud. And he said that their backpacks, like instead of the normal hiking gear, like nylon backpacks, they were like these canvas totes. He said he walked up to the group and introduced himself, but they didn't say anything. They just smiled at him. He was really freaked out at this point. He was like, I'm lost. Can you all point me back to the trail, please? And they all just slowly pointed back in the direction of the staircase. At this point, he is freaking terrified. He turns around and like hightails it out of that campsite. Eventually, he was able to find his way back down to the trail, and this is the really freaky part. Once he gets back down the trail a little ways and finds a place where he feels safe to camp out for the night, as soon as he starts unloading his bag to put up his tent, the sun starts coming up. What he said should have only been about a 2-hour experience ended up being the entire night. This story had me spiraling, y'all. Have any of you all ever had an experience like this or heard of these staircases before? Drop it in the comments and let me know.
My girlfriends and I probably had one of the most scariest weekends of our lives when we took a girls' trip in the Appalachian Mountains. And before you come at me, I need you to know that I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, born and raised Eastern Kentucky. I'm going to try to make this as short as I can, but I have to give you the story in the chunks and the details that it happened because none of it makes sense. We frequent Boone in the mountains. It's an easy drive for us, and we just love staying there. We love going to the wineries. The area is just beautiful. We go to the fall to watch the leaves. You can go in the winter and just catch a cozy vibe, or you can go in the summer and beat the heat from the city. The way I have to explain this story to you is that this happened in phases. So I would say phase 1 is the first night that we're together. Phase 2 is the actual occurrence. And then phase 3 is like the follow-up and a weird story. So we stayed in Linville Falls, and if you're familiar with the area, it's a super small town, and you can go to like a crossroads essentially, and there's an old store, there's a bunch of old houses built into the mountains, and there is caverns, I think, that you can go and tour. So it's me and 2 of my other girlfriends. My 2 girlfriends are coming from the city, I'm coming from somewhere else. They're driving together, and I drive separate, so I arrive there first. And when I walk in, the place is immaculately clean. It's beautiful and it's old. It's rustic. They've kept that old charm. The stove is old. All the kitchen appliances are old. They've kept a lot of the stone features throughout the house. There's a wood burning fireplace. There's a record player. And so of course I have to go play around with the record player. So anyways, I'm there by myself. I've already made my rounds, and the owners of the house have actually set out a bottle of bourbon for us. It is super cozy, and we're getting ready to start the night. The girls have arrived. And throughout this entire cabin, there's relics from the past. It's very old and rustic and mountain Philly. And there's a guitar. There's a corner with some old guitars and some old instruments, a record player, yada, yada, yada. And my girlfriend picks up the guitar and she just starts being silly and strumming. There's a video. I will have to ask them before I show it, but if I get permission from them, I will post it. But anyways, I filmed the video of my girlfriend playing on the guitar and I send it to my mom, and my mom says, "What is that light that just came out of the guitar and flew into my other girlfriend?" So we laugh it off because when you go back and watch the video, there's a light that leaves the guitar and then it goes into my girlfriend. I'm filming. And we laugh it off because we're a couple of drinks in at this point. So anyways, this is phase 1. This is the night before everything happens. We're doing our thing. We're going outside. We are inebriated. And I tell you this not to condone it. I tell you this because Satan himself could have walked into the room and I would have made him a cocktail. Maybe I didn't notice what was going on. Maybe we just didn't notice. But I also think that it made our vibrations and energy a little lower and again, fed into this whole fiasco that I'm going to go into. Long story short, that night we all crashed together in the living room. There's a couch, there's a love seat, there's a recliner. We all have our own spaces and we crash. So I wake up in the middle of the night, and we always have music playing. We always bring a speaker with us. That's our vibe. But I wake up in the middle of the night and I notice this loud music is playing and it's creepy. But the sheer volume of it, there's no way we had our music up that loud, and how did we sleep through it? I also have an eclectic music taste, and when you turn your music on, sometimes it shuffles and you're like, I have no idea how this got here, but I genuinely have no idea how this song got on anywhere on my playlist. But I wake up my other girlfriend and she was like, "What is playing?" It is very low vibration, but it's techie, disco-y, and a little rock. But the energy is off and we're just that's weird. Anyways, we all slept in the living room that night, which is going to bring me to night 2. Okay, so the next morning we get up, we have plans. We're going to go to a winery. It's going to be a low-key day. I get up and I make coffee. I'm doing my morning routine and I notice something right then and there. There are rosaries all over this house. Every doorway, every archway, it is an entrance and an exit into a room, if it's a doorway, there's a rosary. And I think I have some pictures and I'm going to look, but if I don't have them, I'm sorry. No idea how we missed that, but I pointed out to my girlfriends and we're like, that is weird, but we also are in the South, so maybe they're religious. It's somebody else's home. Whatever, it is what it is. But then we got to thinking that maybe we should start poking around and looking at the guest books and looking at the things that they have sitting around the home. Not that we didn't poke around before, but... We see the guest book, so we open it up and my girlfriend starts reading it out loud and we start noticing something. This house is old and there's a lot of older views. They go back to the 90s, which would make sense. We're also in a ski resort town, so people would have came and stayed for skiing. But the message is the same constantly. This place feels like home. It's so warm and inviting. I feel like I've been here before. Everybody's saying the same exact thing about this house. In fact, what we think is even more weird is that people are leaving Polaroid pictures of their families in this book. Again, it's a ski trip, whatever, it's their kids, they're going down the mountains, it's snowy. But there are a lot of pictures of families. and they all think it feels like home. Anyways, we laugh it off and we're like, this house is trying to keep us. Like, it's trying to keep us like the movies where you see where you go a place and you just truly never can get out of it. We go to the winery, we have a good day. Nothing of significance happens. But phase 2 is coming next. Now, again, when I start talking about phase 2, I want you to know that I'm telling you from my perspective. So the girlfriends and I, we decided we're not going to sleep in the living room. We have to drive back home tomorrow. There are 3 bedrooms. We're going to sleep in a bed and get a good night's rest. It's an old mountain home, and it's got 1 bathroom. That's really common with old homes. So there's a long hallway. There's 2 bedrooms on one side, 1 bedroom on the other, and the bathroom is at the very end of the hallway. I go to the bathroom, get ready for bed, don't think anything of it, and go to sleep. There's also a storm coming, so everything that I hear, I'm chalking it up to the wind, to this noise, to the storm. Also, there is a back porch that goes and kind of backs up to the room I'm staying at. And if you walked down this back porch, there's a window, and that window would be into my bedroom that I'm in. And I just hear what sounds like somebody running or pacing back and forth on this porch. And I'm like, it has to be the storm. I'm not going to go out here and wake up my friends. Like, this wind is crazy. And then we start hearing knocking at the door. Well, I start hearing knocking at the door. And I'm like, again, maybe there's something on this back porch that is blowing, the wind is blowing it against the door. I'm trying to tell myself that this is silly. Why am I being scared? I'm an adult. Then the door handle starts jiggling, and I hear, like, when you have the door locked and you hear a jiggle. So, again, how is the wind doing this? But at the same time, I hear somebody get up and walk down the hallway and go into the bathroom. I see the lights turn on. I hear the water running. Somebody's in the bathroom. And I'm like, wow, this storm is so strong. Like, it's woken one of my girlfriends up. I hear somebody walk back down the hallway, get in a room, and I keep hearing people walking down the hallway. And I'm like, who's going to the bathroom? But again, we're adults, and I'm like, I don't want to bother anybody. But, like, I keep hearing somebody walking to the bathroom. I hear the door open. It's old. I hear the creaks. I hear the sink turn on. I hear the toilets flush. Like, I hear someone's in the bathroom. Anyways, I barely got any sleep that night, and I tried to pretend like it was just this wind and this storm, but I was completely creeped out. So phase 3 starts. It's the next morning, and I wake up and I see my girlfriend sitting on the couch, and I'm like, what are you doing, girl? And she was like, I could not sleep. I kept hearing something like it was pacing the porch, and like I kept on hearing the door handle jiggle. I kept on hearing like somebody was knocking on the door, and it was freaking me out. And I was like, me too. I said, and who kept going to the bathroom? Did you go to the bathroom like 3 times? And she was like, no, I thought it was you or my other friend. And I'm like, well, it wasn't me. I said, but I kept hearing somebody going to the bathroom. I was like, girl, it wasn't me. Must have been my other friend. And we were laughing, but we like realized we had the same experience. We were just in 2 different rooms. So then my other girlfriend comes and she's waking up and she's coming to the living room to talk to us. And we were like, why did you go to the bathroom so many times? And she's like, I never went to the bathroom once. I thought it was you guys. She also confirmed that she heard all the noises and like the door handle jiggling, etc., etc. So we just realized in that very moment that all 3 of us were in different rooms and had the same experience all night. We heard the same things, we thought the same things, and none of it was true. So we're freaked out, but it's checkout time. We're laughing it off. I go to make coffee and we're talking about it, and I turn around and I say, it's so funny that all 3 of us had the same experience in different rooms. And as soon as I say that, the electricity to the entire place cut off. Needless to say, we have never packed an Airbnb and got out as fast as we did. But to this day, people don't believe us. People don't believe the story. It's one of the weirdest things that I've ever had happen to me in my life. If you have a similar story, I would love to know, because I truly, truly cannot explain the events of that weekend. And I know some things just don't have an answer. Anyways, yeehaw.
While living in the Appalachian Mountains for the last 25 years of my life, I've experienced some pretty unexplainable things. But one thing that I have never experienced, that I hope to God I never do, is the sudden change in light. If you're confused, let me explain. This is a lesser known, or at least lesser talked about phenomenon that happens in Appalachia in the middle of the day. So picture this. You are out on a hike in Appalachia. Maybe you're on the trail, maybe you're just on a trail. And you know that it is noon. It is 12 p.m. But suddenly, out of nowhere, when there's not a cloud in the sky, it is dark, like midnight level dark. And then shortly after it gets pitch black, nature will go completely silent. This is one of the scariest things I've ever heard, and I have heard and read countless stories of this happening to people here. So if you are unlucky enough that this happens to you, remember that you are no longer welcome in the area that you're in, and you need to calmly get out. Do not run. I'm actually terrified of that happening.
A girl DM'd me and said she wanted to share her story about growing up in the Appalachian foothills in Kentucky and why you should never whistle at night. I'll be honest, I don't know much about Appalachian lore as I didn't grow up in Kentucky, but I asked my husband, whose family is from Kentucky. I said, were you ever told not to whistle at night? And he said, I was taught never to whistle at all. This is Jane's story. That is her real name, but she didn't want to be tagged. Jane started her email by saying that where she grew up in Kentucky, stories weren't just stories. They were lessons and they were warnings passed down from generation to generation. Jane grew up in a small 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with her mother and her grandmother. Their closest neighbor was 3 miles away. The house had been in their family for generations. Her great-grandfather had built it himself. Jane's mother worked most days, so she was often left alone with her grandmother. Growing up, Jane was allowed to go play and explore the woods, often unsupervised. Generally, her grandmother would be on the front porch in a rocking chair, smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, and staying within close range. Jane's grandmother was a staunch believer in the idea that kids should be kids and often encouraged her to go and play. Jane says she learned a lot about nature living there. She would always find tadpoles, bring them home and watch them turn into frogs. She would find bugs, build them small habitats. She would watch the baby deer grow up every spring and summer. But Jane's grandmother had 2 rules, and the first was that Jane had to be in the house by dusk, and the second was that Jane could not whistle at night, even if she was in the house. When Jane asked why she wasn't allowed to whistle at night, her grandmother only ever said, "It calls them to you," and refused to elaborate. So Jane grew up with the idea that there were monsters or people in the woods that would come if you whistled. So Jane grows up, she goes off to college. Her mother had since fell in love with and married a man who lived in the suburbs of Louisville. Only her grandmother is left living in this house. And Jane doesn't go back very often. There's not a lot for her there. And at this point in her life, she views the place where she grew up just as a small mountain town where a lot of old people live who still believe in magic and folklore. But Jane's modern. She's a millennial. She has a smartphone. She watches The Bachelorette. The world that she lives in is bigger and more vibrant than the dusty old stories that her grandmother clung to. But obviously her grandmother's lessons are ingrained in her. She was raised that way. So anytime she hears somebody whistle, especially after dark, she kind of thinks to herself, you're not supposed to do that. But of course she never says anything. She doesn't want to be weird. When she's a junior in college, she's going back to her grandmother's house for Christmas. Her mother and her mother's new husband are also going to be there. She drives a day early to go stay with her grandmother. Her grandmother is older. She's getting sick. Jane doesn't know how much time she's going to have left with her. Before she gets to the house, she stops at the general store in the last town to get a Red Bull and some snacks before taking the long twisty road to her grandmother's house. She pulls up the long driveway, parks her car, and as she gets out, for some reason she's just struck with the urge to whistle. She says she doesn't know what it was. Something about being there just gave her the urge. The sun was about set, but it wasn't completely dark, and she lets out this long, high-pitched whistle. She says she stopped and looked around because she half expected something to happen, but nothing did. All she heard was the wind through the trees. So she goes up, knocks on the door, and her grandmother answers. Her grandmother welcomes her in, asks her if she wants some tea, and the two go out to the front porch where they had spent so much time when Jane was growing up. They're sitting there for about an hour, and there's a break in conversation when Jane notices something is off. She says there was no wind, the air was completely still. Keep in mind, it's December, but it's a relatively warm night in December. All the trees are barren, no leaves, nothing moving, complete stillness. And then they hear a whistle in the woods. And it's Jane's whistle. The same long, high-pitched whistle that Jane had whistled earlier. And her grandmother grabs a chair, her knuckles going white, and she stands up and she says, "Did you whistle at night?" And Jane starts stammering because this actually scares her. And she's like, "Well, I did when I got here, but it wasn't quite dark, and I didn't think anything was going to happen." Her grandmother's like, "We have to go inside right now." The two go inside where there's a fire going, and they hear the whistle again, but it's closer this time. Her grandmother's sitting in the chair close to the fire, and she's like, "Why did you do that? I told you never to whistle at night." And Jane still doesn't entirely know what's going on, so she just says, "Well, who is it? Who's whistling?" And her grandmother just says, "We don't know, but you called them and now they're here." Her grandmother reassures her that they're going to be safe as long as they stay inside when there's a pounding at the door. The pounding at the door startled Jane, so she jumps up, and then she realizes that it's probably just her mother and her husband. So she goes over to answer it, and her grandmother just looks at her and she says, "What are you doing?" And Jane says, "Is Mom coming early?" And her grandmother says, "No." She tells her to come sit back down, so she does, and then it's gone. Jane says she has absolutely no explanation. She does not know what it was, but thinking about the experience still terrifies her. And her grandmother has sadly since passed away, and Jane inherited the house, but she says she still has not gone back there. She doesn't know if she ever will, and she's not sure what she's going to do with the house. If you're from the foothills of Kentucky or the Appalachia area in general, please comment and let Jane know what you think she experienced. She will be seeing these comments. And keep sending me your spooky, scary stories. You can DM them to me on my profile page, or my email is also in my bio. I will keep adding those stories to this playlist. Do good, stay bad.
Shout out to all of those TikTok videos that talk about if you're walking in the woods in Appalachia and you hear something or you see something, no you didn't, because I think that just saved my life last night. Story time. Excuse the garage. I'm at my parents' place, and this is the only place my dog is allowed, who plays a crucial role in this story, by the way. He's a very, very good boy, and last night proved it. So, my parents don't live in Appalachia, but they do live in an area that's a little more secluded. It's still a suburb, but it's pressed up against these hills with lots of untouched wilderness, and coyotes are running through there all the time.
It's just a little bit more rural. So I'm sitting in their backyard, which has this tall fence all the way around it, and the wilderness comes right up to that fence. I'm sitting there around the campfire. My dog is laying beside me. I got my laptop open and I'm writing my little stories. Suddenly, my dog lifts his head, stares straight ahead at the fire, doesn't even like look around at the yard, stares straight ahead at the fire and starts to growl. All dog owners know that your dog has different types of barks and growls. This was his warning growl. This is the growl he does when there is danger coming and he's telling it to back away. So immediately I'm like, buddy, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And then I hear a voice at the fence line. And it's not just any voice. It's the voice of a little girl. And it sounds like a creepy doll from a horror movie. It's got that kind of like mechanical quality to it. And it's kind of like muffled and garbled. I'm still getting the heebie-jeebies. And all it does is go, hello? Just like that. Just like that. Hi, just same tone and everything. Now, mind you, it's midnight. There are not going to be any little girls wandering the woods at midnight. So immediately, I was like, well, this is either someone who's gonna me, or it's something else. And what made me think it was something else was the fact that the voice said again, hello? Only this time it had moved, and it had gotten closer, and I'd heard no footsteps. It was just floating closer. And then, mind you, my dog is still growling this entire time. For the next 5 minutes, that voice is just circling the fence line, going, hello? Hi? Hello? Hey? Like, just like that creepy doll voice floating around the fence line. And then suddenly my dog stopped growling, and he put his head down and he went back to sleep, and the voice stopped. I thought, okay, cool. That was weird. And then all of a sudden he lifted his head back up again and started growling. And then the sound of a ticking clock came from the bush directly across from me. Again, heard no footsteps, heard no rustling. Just a ticking clock started in the middle of the night, in the middle of the woods. So don't know what that was. But if anyone wants to hop in the comments and let me know, that'd be great. Because I can't wait to go home today. And I don't see myself coming back here anytime soon. And a big shout out to my protector. Yes, big scary boy.
I got an Appalachian story in my email, and that might be one of the craziest Appalachian stories I have ever heard. Tonight's submitter did tell me I could use her real name, and her real name is Stacy, and she will be tagged in the description. So Stacy goes on this hike. Nothing crazy. She had been on this hike before during the day, but she's on this hike, and suddenly she loses track of time. Boom. It's pitch black outside, and she looks down at her phone, and her phone is only at 3% battery, and there's no signal. So she figures that she'll just go straight until she ends up hitting a road. Big mistake, because she didn't end up hitting a road. She ended up going deeper into the woods. She said something felt off, like the trees weren't right. Like they had been growing in pain, were her exact words. She kept hearing these sounds, not animals, not wind, like something was whispering, and she heard this metal clicking sound. Then she starts hearing what sounds like wind chimes, but not regular wind chimes. It sounds like they're made out of bone, and they're off tune. At this point, she's like, I don't understand where the sound is coming from, but I need to get out of here. So she continues to walk, but then she sees something through the trees. It's this pale light blue light. So she's like, oh great, a campsite, maybe somebody can help me. So she starts walking towards it, and she starts to see people, or what she thinks are people. She starts to realize very quickly that these people don't look right. They're wearing old nightgowns, they're very dirty, and it looks like there's blood on them. Then she gets even closer, and she's like, oh my god, their faces are wrapped in gauze, and their hands are all red. At this point, she just stops, and she observes for a second, because she's like, I have no idea what's going on here. She observes, and she realizes that they are operating on something. Literally operating on something. There's someone laying on a table made of wood and bone, and she's just staring at this point when suddenly one of those people looks up at her. They look directly at her, and she swears she couldn't see eyes, but she knew that they were staring at her. And then she heard a whisper. At first she doesn't know what it's saying, but then she realizes what it said, and it said, "You're early. We can begin." So she just books it. She didn't care where. She just started running. This absolutely terrified her. And as she's running, this dog appears out of nowhere. It was just standing there in the middle of the path, black as night, glowing eyes, making no sound whatsoever. So she thinks this dog is going to attack her, so she gets scared again and she starts backing away very slowly, and then she turns around and blinks and she's in a different part of the woods. It's like she teleported. But that dog, it was still behind her, but she didn't hear it move. No panting, no pause, no breath. She started running again because she's like, I have to get out of these freaking woods. She's absolutely terrified at this point. But every time she runs, she stops. She doesn't see anything. And then she hears those wind chimes again. And then she turns and she looks and she sees the dog again. She's not giving up at this point. So she starts running again and she stops again, except for this time she doesn't hear wind chimes. She hears something like, it sounds like someone is blowing through some type of horn, or like she describes it as like she thought someone is blowing through a bone. Like that's what she was picturing in her head. Like a loud horn that sounded like a bone. She says she's not really sure how to describe it or how she knew this. It's something that she pictured in her head, but like she heard it. It was loud and it was clear. So she's just standing there at this point in complete disbelief, and she's terrified out of her mind because she doesn't know how she's going to get out of these woods. And as she's thinking all of these thoughts and hearing this sound through this like horn, she hears a whisper, and it says, "You're almost there. Let us open you up." This scared her out of her ever-loving mind. So at this point, she starts praying, and she's actually praying out loud, and she's saying, God, the universe, someone, can you please help me? Like, I don't understand what's going on. I need to get out of here. Suddenly, she's alone again, and it's just her in the dark, but it's very, very dark. Finally, she breaks through the trees, and she sees a road, but it's not a road that she recognizes. It's stretched forever in both directions. No signs, just blacktop and trees. So at this point, she's trying to think rationally, and she's like, okay, I'm going to walk until I see a car, or a car passes me. And suddenly a car does pass her, but it doesn't stop, even though she's waving her arms. She screamed too, but they didn't even glance or slow down. Then she hears footsteps behind her again, and then she turns around, but there's nothing there. So she turns back around and she sees this woman, but she's wearing a wedding dress. This woman is just standing on the side of the road, not moving, and she looks very pale, and she said that her eyes looked very sad. She does think it's a little weird that she's wearing a wedding dress and she's on the side of the road, but she's like, it's a person. Hopefully this person can help me and tell me where to go. So she asks her for directions, and she's like, hey, am I going in the right way? I'm trying to get out of these woods and to this certain spot. And the lady goes, yes, you're going the right way. And so she thanks her, and the lady smiles at her. So Stacy turns around, and then Stacy turns back around really quickly to ask her another question, but the woman is gone. I mean, she said that there was no trace of this woman. There wasn't even footprints in the dirt where she was standing. But she turns around and she starts walking in the direction that the woman told her, and eventually she sees lights in the distance of a town. So at this point, she's like, thank God, familiar streets, street lamps, houses. And eventually she does get home, but she still doesn't know what happened out there. And different people have told her that people have gone missing out in those woods. Some were found wandering roads miles away, talking about a woman in white. She also found out that other people had exclaimed that they had seen this black dog in the woods and that they had heard wind chimes in the trees. Everyone that she talked to said that if this ever happens to you again, if you see something, no, you didn't. If you hear something, no, you didn't. Which Stacy says this is nearly impossible for her to do. She was only gone for 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity. Only 2. But she also thinks that whatever was out there knew she was coming. Stacy says that she's never told anybody the story in fear of people not believing her, but that she trusts my community and that she knows that we will believe her. And I do believe her. And the crazy thing is that you don't believe something this crazy until it happens to you. I was talking to Jack. Do you guys remember Jack, the story that I told about the guitar and he apparently sold his soul to the devil? He was telling me that he didn't believe in the paranormal at all until what happened to him happened. And that now he can't even watch some of my stories because they scare him so much, because he now fully believes in the paranormal. And this is one of those stories where if you believe in the paranormal, it's hard to listen to because it's terrifying. One thing that I want to know about this story is what the hell those people were doing out there operating on somebody. It looked like some body to her, like a human being. So what the heck do you think that was? Because that part really got me and terrified me. The whispers scared me too, but like that part was the scariest part to me. I don't know about you guys, but please weigh in on this because I would love to know what you think that is. And anything you have to say about the story, please be respectful, but drop it in the comments because so much to unpack here. But with that being said, I'm now going to do my favorite part, which is the shout outs. Annabeth.chase753. You left such a sweet comment underneath one of my videos and I truly appreciate it. You said, thank you for sharing these stories. Please don't ever stop. And I will never stop. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being a part of this little community community. Thank you for commenting and saying that, because it really meant a lot to me to hear that. Someone told me today, if you ever feel down, Kaisa, go look at your comment section. And that almost made me cry, because I was like, that's so true. I have the most genuine, kind people in my community, and I cannot thank you guys enough. It literally brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. You guys have done so much for me emotionally, you have no idea. So thank you for being one of those people, and I love you. Carmen Lily 7 is my next shout out. Thank you so much for your sweet comment. Again, same thing goes to you. Thank you so much for brightening up my day. Thank you for leaving a comment and pushing out my videos. Thank you for watching my videos. Again, I would not have this page without people like you, and it means so much to me, and I cannot show you my appreciation enough. So thank you. I love you. And my name is Kaisa, and I tell true scary stories on here every single night that you guys submit to me. So if you're into that, hit that follow button, and I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? I need you to keep sending me your scary stories, long ones preferably. What's the second one? Have a safe night. And the third one, say it with me, have a spooky night. I wish I could hear you all say that with me. I love you guys so, so much. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
So this is a clear example of a mimic. They're especially known in the Appalachian Mountains. And it's very common for mimics and skinwalkers to decide to go as people's pets because it's more believable. You can't really ask your pet certain questions. You can't be like, you're not my husband. Tell me this then. You know what I mean? But their dog was already inside. The goal of the mimic is to be able to get inside the house, so do not let them in at all costs. And there is so much darkness and mystery surrounding the Appalachian Mountains and the Appalachian Trail, especially because you can tell here, it's nighttime there. And locals will tell you, do not go there at night. It is not a game, it is a very serious thing. Even if you don't believe in the paranormal lore, there are a lot of really dangerous things out in those woods that you won't be able to see with the naked eye. Like where the ground is weak and can fall through. You can never be too careful out there. Come over here for longer freaky videos.
Anything? No, you didn't. What does that even mean?
So this is a story that I've actually wanted to tell for a very long time. And I went ahead and I reached out to someone to make sure that this was an okay story to share. And I got that permission, and so I'm going to share with you guys a story about this. The question that this gentleman is asking is, you know, when you're in the Appalachian Mountains, people often say, if you see or hear something, no, you didn't. There's a common belief that there's a lot of unexplained or maybe weird or strange or, you know, supernatural experiences that you experience when you're living or are going through the Appalachian Mountains. So the story I'm about to tell you guys is actually published in a actual book called The Grandfather Speaks, which was told by an elder, published by Interlink Books back in 1994. So the story goes is that a long time ago, the animals, the animal nations, and the people, they all lived together in great abundance. That so many animal nations existed that many of them don't even exist to today. And they lived in this great abundance. It is now the Appalachian Mountains or the Ohio River Valley. And one of these animals was called Wakwawi. And Wakwawi means stiff-legged bear. It was the biggest of all the animal nations. Had these stiff arms and kind of lumbered around, and it was covered in really thick and coarse hair and had hide that was thicker than any animal. And from its face came these horns. And these horns, they say, were sharp as spears. And Wakwawi was by nature a mean and destructive creature. That for a long time, Wakwawi had victimized a lot of the other animal nations. And so one day they got sick of Wakwawi and his violence. And they decided that they were going to come together and make war against Wakwawi. So all the animals, and again, even animals that don't even exist anymore, they came together. The birds and the deer and the unknown nations, they came together to make war with Wakwawi. And the fight began. The battle began with Wakwawi. And they fought for so long, and there was so much death that they said that the land was stained red, that the rivers ran red with with blood from the battle, the great battle. And despite them trying their absolute best, the animal nations started to suffer great losses. Even the great bear, like the bear who was the biggest and the strongest besides Wok Wabi, they came to fight, but they got wounded and needed to be removed from the battlefield. The creator sat upon a rock watching his creation make war with one another, and called forth the humankind, told the human nation, the nation of man, that they must join the fight against Wok Wabi to bring balance. And so the mankind, they joined the battle. But even though they joined the battle, Wok Wabi still was coming out victorious. After a while, when enough had been enough, the creator sat upon that flat rock on that hill, had lightning bolts, and started to throw them at Wok Wabi. Started throwing and striking them down. One by one, they started to fall. They were running around and they were going crazy and still fighting with one another. That in this chaos, the Wok Wabi was so big that it started to dig into the earth, and it started to knock things over, and it started to trample really hard through on the land. And that's what they say created the rolling hills of Appalachia. It's the pathways that Wok Wabi would take when it would charge. And one by one, Wok Wabi started to fall from Creator's bolts until there was one left. This last one was the biggest and the strongest, and he came and sort of the charge right at Creator. Creator took that lightning bolt and threw it down there, and it bounced off of his horns. His horns, he knocked the bolt out of the way. He kept charging, and finally he got hit and he got wounded by a lightning bolt. It was so hurt that it started to kind of drag itself, and it ran north. And when it ran, it drug itself across, and that's what they say created the Ohio River itself, was the indentation of it dragging itself as it ran away from the battle. And it was up in the north that they became prevalent, that they became a thing. But in the area now, they were gotten rid of in the Appalachia area. After everything was said and done, it was then realized that so many of these giants, so many of these creatures were killed. So many of these nations that used to exist, ceased to exist, they fought themselves to extinction, battling Wok Wabi. That the blood soaked into the ground. And so when you go to like Kentucky and you go to some of the Appalachian areas, you'll notice that that ground has red clay. That red clay, they say, is the blood of those who died in that battle. And they say that the Wok Wabi remains are still to be found, and that nations later, like generations later after the war, that mankind continued to use tools from the remains of Wok Wabi. And when you see what the remains are of the Wok Wabi, you will discover that they look like this. That is what they have called Wok Wabi, and those horns that were coming out of his face were tusks, and the hair that it had was woolly, and that his stiff legs were that of an elephant, and that it was fought with all the animal nations and humankind. That great war was to fight against Mastodon. Before this time, the food was granted in the area. Food was given to the people and the nations within the Ohio River Valley and Appalachia. And one of those foods was the cranberry. But it is said that the cranberry was not originally red, but that it became red when it was drenched in blood from the great battle with Wok Wabi. And to tie this all together with the original statement, which is why, Appalachia is kind of creepy. And from the words of the elder who was quoted in that book, I read you this. This is why the land now called Kentucky was called the dark and bloody ground, because of all the blood that spilled there. It became a common hunting ground for various tribes, as no one would set up a village there, being greatly afraid of the ghost of those slain giants. We as North American people, generally speaking, have a greater knowledge of the myths and legends that come from overseas. But we have a creation story here too. We have mythologies here too. And I hope that this one made you happy a little bit and maybe sparked some thought and imagination as to why things are the way they are and why they feel the way that they feel with the land that you are occupying and that you live on today. So have a good night.